What in the 20s is going
in the
on?
20s?
Think about
The 20s, baby. Plenty.
What in the 20s is going on?
20s, baby.
This is the 20s.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Zamam Kize, and this is What's in the 20s, a podcast where you listen to me grow through its baby. On this episode, we're going to be speaking about daring to fail, which is such a difficult thing to speak about. It's such a difficult thing to implement. I've had many challenges and experiences with failure. I remember in drama in high school, I once came into the classroom and the teacher was like, today we're going to be doing improv. If you know me, that is one thing I really, really, really suck at, and I don't suck at a lot of things, but that thing, improv, is so incredibly difficult to me. I don't know why, but when we were doing it, it didn't come naturally to me. I'm somebody who I've been trained in a very formal way, in a sense of I always have a script, I always have something that is written, prepared, I prepare long before and all of that kind of stuff. I rehearse and things like that. Even with the podcast, I make notes before sitting down and coming here and stuff like that. I know what I'm going to talk about. I flesh it out. I get sources and resources and all of that kind of stuff. Like, that's who I am. When I do a speech and I do an essay, when I do anything, I love just feeling the most prepared for it. And I think it's because of the idea of perfectionism. When you do improv, you can't plan for perfection. You can't plan to ace it because you just have to go with it. And also with improvisation in the classroom, it was off of we were doing it as groups. So it's not even just me that I need to count on. I need to count on whatever everybody else says or whatever anybody else does or whatever. And I have to receive that and do something with that, which I find so... I feel like I can control myself. I can't control the next person. I can't control what somebody else is going to do and stuff like that. And so... despite the fact that I was the top performer for dramatic arts and matric and stuff, my lowest and my weakest point was improv. And it carried on into varsity when we would do improv and workshops and all of that kind of stuff. I hated going up for improv because those were always my lowest marks. Those were always where I would get stage fright. I would always just freeze, just get anxiety, where I would just not know what to do. And I remember my teacher saying, Zama, the thing about improv is it's about listening. It's about learning how to listen to what somebody is giving to you, is throwing at you. Because what I would do is I would just say anything and try to salvage a situation and throw things or whatever out without even listening to what the previous person, had said or had given to me or whatever it is, without even taking note of what was really going on, because I just wanted to perform and get it out the way, because that's how daunting it was for me. If I think about deals that I get, contracts that I get, there are so many no's that I've received, so many, sorry, we're not looking for anyone, that I've received when it comes to brands and all of that kind of stuff. So many just, people who don't even reply to me, reply to my emails, reply to my messages, to my questions and queries and stuff like that. They are so, if I could show you... If I could show you all the no's I've received in my life, for certain things that I've wanted to take on or projects and all that kind of stuff, certain guests I wanted to have on the show, and all of that, it is way more than the yeses I receive, if I'm being completely blunt with you and stuff like that. I think about when I was applying for jobs when I graduated in 2022, not a single approved letter came back to me for all the jobs that I applied for and all of that kind of stuff. Not a single accepted and all that, which is really difficult for me to grasp and understand, because I don't want to say I'm an overachiever, but I really do my best to succeed, And so when I was being met with either just nothing, and hearing no response and stuff like that, or rejection and all of that kind of stuff, it really, it messes with you, with your ego, with your self-esteem, your confidence, all of that kind of stuff. And I think failure it's really difficult to grasp. So what does somebody even mean dare to fail? Like, you should want to fail. You should choose failure and all of that kind of stuff, because failure for me always just felt like that means something is wrong with me, right? And that's the issue. We internalize failure, that we are the reason something couldn't work out, a relationship failed. We are the reason that school didn't work out the way we thought it would, that we couldn't get a job, this and that, whatever. I'm the problem. I'm short of something. I lack something. I am inadequate. And those are things that we would say to ourselves when we feel like we are not being met with the answers we want, the desired outcome of, I think that there's something so interesting that I'm that I'm reading called the Confidence Code. And in the Confidence Code, they speak about the difference between men and women often is that when men don't get something right? For example, say playing a match, basketball, if they don't win, they just kind of shrug it off and, was like, damn, that was a loss. It sucks. It's terrible. Let's win the next one, and all of that kind of stuff. When women basketball players were playing and stuff, they're thinking, oh my gosh, I need to do this for my team. I need to make my team proud. I need to make our supporters proud. I need to make everyone watching proud. Like, you feel like you're carrying the burden and the weight of anyone and everybody who cares about the sport on you. And we internalize that when you don't win, you're the issue. You're the reason the team couldn't succeed. You're the reason this and that. And it's like, it's this really, it's a really frustrating thing that happens when we're met with failure is we think that it must mean we are inadequate, that it must mean we don't deserve to be here. In the Confidence Code, they speak about like how for some people, they just kind of think, oh, okay, then there must be something wrong with the system, or there must be something wrong with whatever, but not necessarily me, maybe it's just not my time. Maybe it's just like they charge it to other things rather than you, the person, which is such a crazy skill to develop when something doesn't work out for you. I know Tato spoke about it in our episode, Tato Ditebe, on our episode on rejection and all of that. He always says that if it doesn't work out for him, he just says, not today. Like, I guess that just means that it's not happening for him today, but it doesn't mean it's never going to happen for him and all of that kind of stuff. So let's speak about why you should move towards confidence, not confidence, failure, why you should lean in towards failure. I think that if I was not rejected by all those job applications and stuff back in 2022, I would have never started this podcast in 2022. I think that if I got a job back in 2022, I would have never become a writer and a poet. I would have never become what I am today. And I think that failure has honestly been the biggest force of rerouting me, of redirecting me. I think failure can position you in exactly the right place that you need to be. In the right place you need to be looking. In the right place you need to be pouring momentum into, and so I think sometimes when we fail, and why we should lean into it, is maybe you need a new course. Maybe you need a different direction and all of that kind of stuff. And you need failure to show you that and to give you that. I think failure is great because you've just found another way that something doesn't work, I think it's like it should be exciting in a sense of like, oh, okay, so now we can throw away this plan and, rule it out and know that this equation isn't what's going to equal, X and all of that kind of stuff. It's more like it should give you more confidence. In fact, I think it is a confidence booster because you know what isn't for you. You know what isn't working. You know what needs to change. You know another way that you can do something. If anything, failure is really great because it makes you a step closer to your outcome. It makes you a step closer to solving the equation. When you've just kind of figured out that, oh, this relationship isn't working. It's a failed relationship. You're a step closer to finding the right the right relationship, You're a step closer to finding the right partner. You're a step closer to maybe even realizing you don't want a partner right now and all of that kind of stuff. It's like ruling out all the things that just don't serve you anymore, that don't work, that actually just isn't meant to be in your life. And I think if we have that perspective, it changes things for you, and it changes things for the better. I think that it gets you trying. A lot of people with failure, it's another thing they speak about in the confidence code, is because we're so overwhelmed by this idea that we will fail, that we won't get it right, we don't even make the attempt to do it. We don't even try, because we don't want to sit with the embarrassment or the disappointment of it not working out. The same example with improv. I wouldn't put my hand out to, when they say like, oh, we need a volunteer to come up and all of that kind of stuff and all of that. I would never, ever do it because I hated the idea of not getting it right. I hated the idea of being wrong. And so I wouldn't even try when that could have been an opportunity for me to learn. That could have been an opportunity for me to get another skill. That could have been a teachable moment for me, but I rejected it. And in fact, I could have even been way better than what I've made myself out to be in my head, about improv, but I would have never known, because I didn't try. And leaning into failure gives us a fighting chance. It gets us in the ring. Some of us were arguing and frustrated and stuff, but we're not even in the ring. We're not even in the game. We're not even playing. And I think it's so sobering to realize that the reason why I haven't achieved this or gone for this or whatever is because I'm so afraid of failing. Our fear of failure takes over our faith that we can get it right, that we can solve it, that we can eventually figure this out. And so we kind of abandon the task altogether. And I think that's so scary to think about, that there's some of us who have no idea our full potential, have no idea the things that we can do and overcome. There are skills I've taken on in my life that I once never even thought, it was inconceivable to me that I would one day be a podcaster, that I'd have the skill of, being a podcaster and stuff like that, because it never crossed my mind to do that. And I delayed it, I didn't try, and I put it off, and I negotiated, and I just, all of that kind of stuff, because I just kept thinking, no. I never even could have dreamed it. It was never a part of my 5-year plan and all of that kind of stuff. And now I'm here, and it is one of my favorite things to do. I am in love with this job. I show up for it consistently, so because as much as, I hope that it pours into people, it is equally as rewarding for myself, and I think that is such a dream. And I failed a lot with the podcasting. My sound was terrible when I began podcasting, and I hated that. My topics, they weren't clear enough or fleshed out enough. They weren't detailed enough. They weren't researched enough. There were so many different things, and I failed with my, when I began and stuff like that. At least I considered myself a failure, with my beginning episodes and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm so, so, so grateful. I kept leaning into it in order to get this version of me that feels somewhat more at home and more comfortable sitting in front of the mic than I was in the very, very, very beginning stages of 2022, and it took a lot of time. Even being able to interview somebody else is so crazy to me. When I had designed this podcast in my mind, I had only kind of thought of it as being me, and I didn't even think about what it would look like to have somebody on the podcast, to talk to someone, to ask somebody questions. I never saw myself as an interviewer, as a journalist, or whatever it is you want to call it. And it's so crazy that these are skills that I'm currently learning, that I'm still currently trying to get right and master and all of that kind of stuff. And that's what makes it so exciting. Like it's such a journey. There's new things you're going to pick up and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that if I was so caught up on all the beginning episodes where I felt like such a failure, I would have never stuck to it for as many years as I have. I'm still new to it. I mean, I'm only about maybe 4 years in now, but it's like that thing of you never would have known how good you can get. You never would have known the opportunities that would be presented to you because you get so caught up in the fact that it didn't work out for you. I think another reason why leaning into failure over fear is great is because you know better now. You know what to look out for first and foremost. Say it comes to a relationship, if you had a failed relationship, you know the certain traits in someone that do that aren't compatible with you. It's like when you've done a test before and you failed that test. When it comes again, you know precisely what to prepare for. You know precisely what that question is going to be and all of that kind of stuff. You've played these games before, you know. It's that feeling of you know better. You know the better decisions to be making. You know the better choices, you know, the better options to be presented with and all of that kind of stuff. You know if you're going into a space where you need to negotiate for yourself, negotiate for your salary and all of that kind of stuff because of your experiences and stuff like that. You know what you deserve, you know. And I think failure is an incredible cursor in terms of just navigating. You know what I'm saying? Like knowing better is so great because it gives you an opportunity to do better. It gives you an opportunity to perform better. It gives you an opportunity to choose better. And I don't know. I think failure, it's a great way of trying again, if that makes sense. It's a great way of getting a redo or whatever and like nailing it even way better than somebody else who could have, you know, done it and get it right on their first time and stuff. Because like I said, because you know what to look out for, you know where the booby traps are, you know when the weapons are going to be coming out and being formed against you and stuff. You know if someone is an ally or against you, whatever. Like I think you have better discernment and all of that because of it. Like, you know what I said, when you cross out the equation that doesn't work, you know not to use that same equation again. A different input needs to be put, you know, if we're trying to get to the results that we want and the outcome that we want. We know what to avoid. So as I said, because you know where the booby traps are now, you know not to step there. You know not to walk in this direction or take this path because this is going to happen. You avoid it and go a different way, you know, different conversations and stuff like that. If you used to be someone who's constantly reactive and explosive and all of that kind of stuff, now that you know better, because who you used to be costed you a lot. It costed you a lot of good relationships and all of that kind of stuff. A lot of good standing with people and everything. Now you can avoid taking that route where you feel provoked, where you feel antagonized, where you feel like somebody is putting you in a tight spot and you need to do something about it. You can avoid it and actually just, you know, shut it down, actually just walk away, actually just not entertain it or give it your attention and stuff like that. And that's what's so cool. Like if you have seen better, you know, your mind will keep wanting to attract better and move in the direction of better. You know which questions to ask. That is something that I love about failure. I never know the right questions to ask, especially because now coming into a space where I am essentially working for myself and stuff like that. Excuse me. I never knew what I should be asking when somebody wants to work with me, you know. In the very beginning stages, I had no idea what to look out for, and I failed a lot of the times. I accepted less than what I deserved. I took work that didn't align with the job description, all of that kind of stuff, because I didn't ask the right questions. Excuse me. And now that I have the experience and that I've failed so many times over and over and over during the negotiation period, during the discussing period and all of that kind of stuff, I know exactly what I should be asking if I want to show up for myself. I know exactly what I need answered in order to get the job done and to get the job done right and get the job done to an extent that it meets the reward and the fulfillment that it should come with and all of that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, those are things that help you a lot. You have to fail a couple of times to know what you should be asking, what you should be demanding, what you should be expecting and all of that kind of stuff. You don't even know what to expect when you haven't failed, when you haven't tried, when you haven't attempted and all of that kind of stuff. I think failure builds resilience. You need resilience. You need to be able to have that skin, you know, that tells you to keep going, to keep trying, to keep pushing, to keep, you know what I'm saying? If I just keep knocking on that door, if I just keep, you know, somebody eventually is going to have to listen to me. Somebody eventually is going to have to open and reply and all of that kind of stuff. I think you need that failure to not let new failures hold you back or derail you and stuff. I think when you have a system of dealing with failure and a history of dealing with failure, it's proof that you've surpassed failure, that even though you've failed before, you've, overcome failure many times too, which is such a great way to remember that you are capable and that you can do something, because you were able to do something in your past and all of that kind of stuff. I think it helps you succeed because it takes you steps closer. It takes you steps closer in the right direction. It takes you steps closer to what it is that you desire and all of that kind of stuff. I think that the problem with fearing failure, as I said before, is that you don't try. So if you don't try, how can you get closer? How can you get to the destination and all of that kind of stuff? I think if you keep fearing failure, you will always be the rookie. And by the rookie, it means like you'll always be the newcomer, you'll always keep trying at something new, but never completing it, never finishing the task and stuff like that, because you fail and you let it go. You fail and you stop. That's another issue, is you stop when you fail. You're not supposed to stop, Failure is not the opposite of success. Inaction is. And inaction means not doing anything at all. That's the opposite of succeeding and all of that kind of stuff. That's the opposite of getting to where you want to be. But failure is a part of the process. Failure is a part of the journey. Failure is exactly how you achieve your goals. Failure is exactly how you become the version of you want to be. And I think that if you keep avoiding it and stuff like that, you'll always be the newcomer at something. You'll never master it. You'll never perfect the skill. You'll never solve for X. You'll never solve the equation because you're just always the new person. You need to lean into it and stick with it and keep choosing it over and over and over until there are no more other possible outcomes than for you to get it right, then for you to succeed and all of that kind of stuff. I think failure keeps you stuck, keeps you feeling like you can't move, keeps you restrained, keeps you in the same position that you are and all of that kind of stuff. I think that your chances of winning and succeeding, keep shortening the more you don't choose failure. I think you are less likely to get to where you want to be. I think if you ask anyone who is successful and stuff like that, many of them, I'm pretty sure, would tell you that how they got here is by working through failure over and over and over again, using it as a means to evaluate, as a tool to get to their goal, get to where they want to be and stuff like that. I think when you fear failure, your future suffers. By that, so the previous episode we spoke about how your future you is depending on you. So that version of you suffers because you didn't want to make the choices in your present you to fail now. People sometimes think, oh, I'm too old right now to go back to school and get a degree and all of that kind of stuff. But I know a friend of mine who said she's going back to school now. I think she's doing her master's. She was like, Zama, do you know that by the time I graduate, I'll still be under my 30s? Like that's so crazy. You think it's so late now. Like I've been working for a while now and all of that kind of stuff. And we keep thinking, oh, no, because we're trying to satisfy the present version of us that doesn't feel ready for it. But by the time you're done, it's like you're so grateful. So the future version of you is going to thank you, But if you don't lean into failure and all of that kind of stuff, you let that version of you down. When you sit and it's a later stage of your life and you're just like, oh, I wish I did this 2 years ago. I wish I did this, 5 years ago. I wish I started my YouTube channel when I started this podcast. I only started my YouTube channel June, July last year. And I wish I started it back in 2022. Those are things I think about. When people say that like we need to start saving now, all of that kind of stuff. Versions of us suffer when we don't choose to show up for that. And yeah, I think that's just what I think about. It's like you don't get to grow if you don't choose failure. You don't get to expand, to change your mind, to all of these things when you don't choose failure. And growing is an important part of evolution. It's an important part of us evolving as human beings and just evolving as a community, as a society, as a human race, and all of that kind of stuff. And when we don't choose failure, we restrict us and limit us from that access. And that's honestly what I wanted to speak about today. Is when you're in the face of failure and stuff like that, lean into it, choose it, go for it, get excited for it and stuff like that. Because I think if anything, you will feel like you're moving the needle. As always, I'm sending my love. Goodbye.
What in the 20s is going
In the
on?
20s,
Think about
yes.
the 20s.
The 20s,
What
baby.
plenty.
Plenty.
What in the 20s is
I am
going
here
on?
for my 20s, baby.
This is the 20s.